Welcome to my channel, INTJ Island. Today I'm going to present a story of mine called An INTJ Visits Scrooge. Susan stepped inside and closed the door of the VR room. She pushed the Do Not Disturb button, which locked the door and illuminated a warning in the outside hallway, so no one else would try to enter. She set the parameters for her virtual experience before lying down on the lounging couch and smoothing out her yellow dress. She leaned back onto the soft VR pillow. The room around her faded into a gray fog, and then she was standing on a street in Old London before a shop that had a sign over the door that said Scrooge and Marley. She was not here to test her skills against opponents. This was a fact-finding mission. She was in indestructible mode with full control powers. The street was busier than she had originally expected. Light poured out of the shop windows, and people in heavy winter coats stopped to look at the Christmas displays. Others walked by quickly in the misty twilight, with some goal of their own in mind. High above her, a church bell chimed out the time. A group of workers were warming their hands at a fire blazing near their project. It was a dingy world, but many people were smiling and saying, "Merry Christmas," to each other just the same. "Pardon me, miss," an old gentleman said as he and his wife squeezed past her on the walkway. "Merry Christmas," the wife said. "Merry Christmas," Susan replied automatically. What was it like to live like this, she thought. Her life was so open and easy compared with the hard and cramped world of these people. The fog, in apparent answer, pushed in upon her, growing thicker, shortening her visibility greatly. Distant activities were now lost to view. However, the sounds of happy people, including a small group of children singing carols in the street, were still audible. It was cold, bitterly cold, even in her heavy winter clothes and coat. Susan shook her head and pushed the door open, and she stepped inside. A clerk looked up from behind a small desk in a cramped alcove off the entryway. He had a burning candle on his desk that did little to brighten the dark space. These working conditions surely would be bad for his eyes. "Good day, Mr. Cratchit," Susan said. The clerk looked at her curiously, as though vainly searching his memory, trying to place her face. "Good day, miss," Cratchit said. "What can I do for you?" "Not a thing, sir," Susan said. "Thank you just the same." Susan turned to enter Ebenezer Scrooge's counting office. It was small. She was shocked by the idea people could live like this. It was dark, dingy, and cold. She felt like her head would hit the ceiling if she did not duck. "Wait," Cratchit said. "You can't go in there." "Go back to work," Susan said, "and forget all about me." She waved her hand, and Bob Cratchit suddenly lost all interest in her, and returned to the letter he was working on at his desk. As Susan approached Scrooge's desk, the old man looked up in surprise and said, "Who are you, madam? If you have come to ask for money for the poor, you'll not get it from me." "My name is Susan Colt," she said. "However, you may address me as Miss Colt. I do not want anything from you except information." "Listen, Miss Colt," Scrooge said, "I'm a very busy man. State your business so that I may return to my work." "My business, as you refer to it," Susan said, "is to understand why you waste your considerable talents on what you call your work." "I do not waste my talents, young lady," Scrooge said angrily. "I have built a very lucrative business." "You have, sir," Susan said. "I have determined that you could sell this business very easily, and with the proceeds, you could retire to live in wealth for the rest of your days." "I live alone," Scrooge replied. "My business gives me purpose. If I retired, I would spend my days wandering around my house like a ghost." "Why?" she asked pointedly. "Why does my business give me purpose?" he asked. "Or why would I wander around my house?" "The purpose is clear enough," Susan replied. "But why is someone who is clearly talented and intelligent unable to find enjoyable and useful activities apart from your work? Like attending parties and listening to vacuous people chatter on about the weather?" he said derisively. "No," Susan said. "I despise such things. I meant like learning an instrument, reading books, or writing them, studying, playing chess, whatever you might find of interest." "You are a strange lady," Scrooge said. "I have not met your like before." "Be that as it may," Susan said, Why are you unnecessarily trapped in this repetitive life?" "I am the master of my life here," Scrooge said. "I am in control of what goes on." Susan glanced at the clerk in his tiny cubbyhole and then looked back at Scrooge. She said, "Yes, however, you spend your time and your money in the very same way today as you did when you were young. Your business then was not secure. Your finances were precarious. But today, your business is thriving, and you have amassed great wealth. You could make life comfortable and easy, but you live as if your resources were few. My question is, why?" "That, Miss Colt," Scrooge replied, "is none of your business." "Pay close attention, Mr. Scrooge," Susan said slowly. "You will not get rid of me until you tell me what I want to know." Scrooge rose to his feet in anger, but Susan waved her hand, and he stopped short with a look of surprise on his face. "Sit down, Mr. Scrooge," Susan said. Scrooge quickly sat down in confusion. He said, "I was right. You are not as other women." "Now tell me," Susan said, ignoring his comment, "why do you go on and on, doing the same thing over and over again? You feared poverty, and that drove you on to succeed. But poverty no longer is a threat. You are still striving for a goal that you reached years ago." "I do not know," Scrooge said thoughtfully. "It is what I have always done." He looked off to the side as though studying the shelf of books. "That is as I feared," Susan said. "If you were granted your fondest wish, what would you choose to do with the rest of your life?" "I don't have time for such humbug," Scrooge said. "I have my life, and it is as I choose to live it. I do not live in a fantasy world where wishes are granted to me." "Indeed?" Susan asked. "Watch this." The scene changed, and they were standing in the Kurtzen mansion living room. There were children playing chess by the fireplace, and Jennifer was playing Tchaikovsky's Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairies on her grand piano. The Christmas tree reached more than 15 feet into the air, and the angel on top nearly touched the vaulted ceiling. "What would you say," Susan asked, "if you were offered the chance to come home to this, rather than your dingy quarters?" Or perhaps... Suddenly, they were standing beside the enormous pool on the Attis tropical island resort, Gulliver's Island. A robotic waitress was bringing drinks to the couple sitting at the edge of the pool, and children were laughing and swimming, watched over by a robot lifeguard. At that moment, little Pamela flew out of the water slide, screaming in delight as she hit with a huge splash. Susan pointed his attention to Seaman's Cove, and Scrooge's mouth dropped open as he saw a mermaid fly up into the air and then fall back into the water with a splash. And then Susan waved her hand, and they had returned to the dingy office. Scrooge was silent. He pressed his hands against his chest and then felt his arms, testing their reality. His eyes were wild, as if he feared that he was mad. "I have another question," Susan said. "When your fiancé broke off your engagement, you still had not reached your goal of financial security. I completely understand your choice not to marry at that point in time. But why did you not seek out another woman to marry once you were completely secure? Surely you could have supported her easily and provided for many children with ease. You might have a son to take over your business. But you didn't. You loved that girl, I understand that, but she walked away because you were focused on business. Your heart was broken, but surely a better woman could have mended your heart." "Will you please leave my office, Miss Colt?" Scrooge pleaded. "You are opening old wounds." "I will not leave," Susan said firmly. "Explain your actions." "I cannot," Scrooge said in misery. "I decided that love was too chaotic for my taste. In a way, I feel as though I was predestined to be here as I am. I have no other explanation as to why." "It is as I feared," Susan said. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Scrooge." And suddenly, she was gone. Scrooge stared into the empty space where the pretty brunette had stood, and he wondered if she were real. Was he going mad? He finally shook his head and said, "Bah humbug," and returned to his work. Susan walked out of the VR room and was so deep in thought that she nearly ran into Bill Colt as he left his office. "What's the matter, Sue?" Bill asked as he reached out to steady his daughter. "Oh," she said sadly, "I'm just disappointed. I talked with Ebenezer Scrooge, trying to find out why a guy with so much talent and such high intelligence had turned out to be so unhappy. But he had no answers. That was the way Dickens wrote him, Bill said. However, that can happen in real life when someone lets important things just drift along. Rolling with the punches is all well and good, but when things could be better, the wise choice would be to get out of the ring entirely and to find a better pastime. Dad, Susan said, why have so many people been content to continue to accept bad things happening rather than changing course? People don't like change, Bill said. It scares them. That is the root of the old saying, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. Being willing to decide to accept any devil is a poor choice. Reading Earth history has puzzled me on that point, Susan said. People strove and even died in order to create a wonderful civilization and then let it fall into ruin bit by bit, when with just a little effort to guard their prize, they could have maintained it indefinitely. Sadly, Bill said, it seems that mankind is hardwired to fail. But Dad, Susan asked, what about Attis? Are we also doomed? Sue, Bill said, your mom and I are going to do all that we can to make sure that the civilization here will not fail. But only time will tell. Wish us luck. Oh, I do, Susan said. The future of my children depend upon it. Ours too, Bill said. Susan smiled and shook her head. If you enjoyed the video, please click like. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. If you click on the bell, you will also receive notifications when I put up a new video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.